Hi, I'm Mike Parrish from Blount County Voter Information. Now, today I'm speaking to you not as a representative of Blount County Voter Information, but as a citizen. This is going to be the inaugural session of our Bully Pulpit series. So, what that is we're giving you, anyone who's a citizen of Blount County and has a real situation, issue, concern that is of importance to the community. We're giving you an opportunity to get on here and speak your mind, to get your words out to everyone else. Because chances are, if it's something that bothers you, it's bothering other people. But until someone knows that they're not the only one, oftentimes we remain silent. So we're giving you the opportunity for you to get that word out there, to build that support. And if it is something that everyone feels is a big deal, then you can make sure that you get the ball rolling towards fixing it. So the name Bully Pulpit comes from Theodore Roosevelt. He used it to refer to the presidency. And at the time, the word bully was a little bit different from what it is now. It meant good, excellent. It was a bit of a cheer. A lot of times someone would say something and everybody agreed with it and they'd scream, bully! So that's the context that we're using here. So it's really what he was saying is that it was an excellent platform for delivering messages to the public. So that's what we're trying to do. And we want to make sure that you, the average citizen, has every bit as much opportunity as a president who has clear channels for communication. So, knowing that, we open this forum to everyone. If you are a citizen or an official in Blount County, then by all means, let us know if you have something you want to put out, and we will do everything we can to try and make sure that your words are heard. So now we're going to move on to the purpose of my Bully Pulpit editorial today. As some of you know, there is another proposed landfill in Blount County. This one is the Apex landfill. They're looking to put it in place over behind Porky's Pride off of 160. More specifically, Sibleyville Road, in between Sibleyville Road and the border of Jefferson County. So they had a public forum. We attended. Feel free to watch the video. And as many public forums are, it was scheduled at a time when no one could attend, really. No one who has a job. So I was there. The people representing the landfill were there. And then there were a number of contractors who were there to support the dump because it's going to be a cheaper option for them. So I'm going to give you first some of the information that they put out. And then I'm going to follow up with some of the accompanying information, some of the research that I did, and then we're going to get into some of the shortfalls that, in my opinion, are considerable that I think everyone needs to take into account when they're making their decisions on whether or not this landfill should be allowed to move forward. Okay, so we're going to start off with some of the very, very basics on the project. Of course, again, it's the Sibleyville Road area. The expected traffic for this landfill on a daily basis is going to be 300 tons or approximately 20 trucks per day. So that is all going to be heavy truck traffic on top of the traffic that already flows down these roads. It's expected to operate for approximately 30 years which means that once it's in place, as with most things, it's not going anywhere for a couple of decades, even if it is found to be causing these problems. 9 times out of 10, what will happen is they'll be given some task to complete to make it okay, or they'll be given a fine and they'll just go on about their business. So those are the very, very high level overview points about this landfill before we get into some of the more specific stuff. We're going to start with the protective measures, which is largely going to be related to filtration, because the biggest problem that we want to address with a landfill is going to be water pollution. Solid pollution will generally stay where it is. You know, they will compact it, they will then cover it, compact it some more, that sort of thing. However, water is a little bit harder to corral and a lot harder to protect. So the first measure that I'm going to mention, that they mentioned, it's important to remember that these measures are all recommended by ADEM and that they meet all of the requirements set forth by ADEM. So you want to keep that in mind. So the first protective measure is a vegetative barrier. Now, they stated that there would be a 100-foot vegetative barrier around this landfill. So what does that do? Well, the intention is that if you have all of these plants in this area, then the plants feeding off of that water will then keep that water from moving somewhere else and take the contaminants with them. Now, of course, that puts all the contaminants in the plants, which on a far-reaching scope could cause tons of other problems, but we're not really going to touch on that. So that's what it's supposed to do. Another benefit is the aesthetic, which basically translates to it helps hide the landfill from being seen from outside of the landfill, if you feel like that's a benefit. And last is cost effectiveness. Now, of course, I'm always skeptical whenever someone brings up cost effective as a benefit, because 9 times out of 10, if you skimp on the cost, you're skimping on the quality. And it's really just easy because you leave plants in place. That's really all it is, because, you know, more established plants would obviously use more water. More established plants will have more longevity. And so that's right, refeeding right into the benefit. So the next one is going to be a 5-foot barrier between the floor of your landfill and your water table. So from the bottom where they're starting to pack all these construction, demolition materials and tires, there is 5 feet between that and the water table. And not in a flood zone, which that's pretty self-explanatory. A higher elevation is something that they noted as it being a benefit to help maintain that 5-foot barrier between the floor of the landfill and the water table. They have a clay liner. It's a 2-foot compacted clay liner, which again is well within the requirements of ADEM for filtering that water before it gets to your groundwater. And of course, they were mentioning over and over again how all of the things they're doing are in compliance with ADEM. So everything on there makes it okay. Now, I'm going to get into the shortcomings of these vegetative barriers first. So it only helps if the water is absorbed by the plants. I mean, that's the idea, is that it helps deal with water saturation by the plants absorbing that water. Having lived here I know that heavy rains create a lot of pooling. And if you live on an elevation like I do, then that pooling turns into runoff, which means the water that falls in this area is going to find its way elsewhere. That's important to remember. And largely the benefit is just that it hides everything from the outside. So when you're driving down the road, you don't think that there's a dump there every time you pass by. That's the biggest benefit. The next protective measure is the 5-foot barrier between the landfill floor and the water table. So this one, I would just say, think of your perk tests. You know, when you get your septic tank put in, the water, it goes in. It soaks it up, it saturates it. That's the whole point. I would also point out that with heavy rains, your water table rises. So how much rain can this thing take before that water level comes up past the clay liner, possibly even to the surface where all of the garbage is going to be? Third, we're going to get into the higher elevation. Now, this one to me is kind of a double-edged sword because they spoke of the higher elevation as being helpful in giving that separation between the dump floor and the water table. Now, to get back into what I mentioned with the vegetative barriers, when you get heavy rains, you're going to get above ground pooling and runoff. So, if we're at a higher elevation, when things pool up and run off, they're running out to the surrounding areas. So the surrounding areas have Sibleyville Creek, Douglas Creek, and if the landfill area is at a higher elevation and it goes down, how far down can it go before it reaches the water table? So that's a huge fault in our protection, in that this filtered area is not going to contain the water. And of course they have the retention pools and stuff like that. How much is that going to really hold? I mean, when we have these huge rains, we've seen creeks overflow. We've seen tons of examples of how even the water features that have flow become overwhelmed. So what can we expect out of the rainfall on these areas? Now we're going to touch on the clay liners, and this is the one that really gets me. The clay liner is a valid filtration method according to ADEM. It is not foolproof by any means. The filtration that it provides is, I believe, between 95 and 99%. Okay, so that means that 1 to 5% is still getting through. And some of these chemicals that are in these materials, there is really no safe level for human consumption. And we are still talking about this getting into the water supply. So it's important to remember that even when it functions as it's supposed to, it's still letting stuff through. On that note, let's get to some of the stuff that it doesn't effectively filter. So I did a search on some of the more common waste chemicals that are present in your construction materials, your asphalt, your tires, and that sort of thing, which, if you're interested in knowing more about some of the chemicals that come out of tires that can get into your water supply, watch the Cleveland Citizen Group meeting on the B&B tire landfill on our channel. But I'm going to hit on some other things because they covered the tire situation pretty well. So one of the ones that caught my attention was ammonia. So ammonia, it occurs in a number of materials. However, it's very prevalent in gypsum and drywall. So that's your sheetrock. And as we know, sheetrock is one of the most common construction materials that we have in home building today. Most of your walls are going to be sheetrock. That creates not just the sheetrock waste from the dust, but also the cut pieces. And this ammonia, you may be surprised to know, there's no ADEM regulation for it. They have absolutely no guidance on how much is an acceptable level of ammonia to be found in the water. We know it's in these materials. When they do their testing, when they're trying to meet their requirements, that's not considered, okay? Now, the fun part is while they don't care how much is in your drinking water, if it's in a fishing or wildlife area, they will raise holy hell over it. Important to remember. Now, as we know, ammonia is just not good for you, okay? But it does other things too. Like it can corrode older pipes. It can put the lead and the copper from pipes into the drinking water. Now, aside from that, the ammonia itself is also linked to various health issues. So we have respiratory problems, gastrointestinal distress, neurological effects, and liver and kidney damage, all connected to the presence of ammonia. So when we're looking at this, we are saying actively that it is in the materials, that the clay liner does not filter it, and that means it will get into the water source. Then we follow that up with no one will test for it. So no matter how much of it gets in there, you're never going to know. I know at my house personally, there are many times when I wash the clothes, and when I pull them out from being freshly washed, there will be an earthy or a moldy smell to it. That's one of the indicators that you have ammonia in your drinking water. So it's reasonable to assume we already have it there. There's no way to say for sure because nobody's going to test it. But it's reasonable to assume that we have it in there. Also of note is that the ammonia itself can damage those clay liners. So not only is the ammonia not being filtered, but it can damage the liner, which then creates gateways for the other harmful substances to get into the water supply. This one chemical alone, to me, makes the whole thing not worth doing. Because there's a host of other chemicals, and I'm going to touch on a couple of other ones, but there's so many more, and I encourage you to do your own research. In the notes for the video, I'm going to include some of the links to just a few of the searches that I did so that you can see exactly what kind of stuff I saw, and then to possibly do your own research so that you can be a little bit better educated on this. So that's ammonia. That's a lot right there. But there's more. Tons more. And the next one we're going to hit on is the PFAs. So these are your forever plastics. And we hear about them all the time. We've all heard over and over again how many health issues they relate to plastics. So they're in tons of construction materials, okay? And they're water soluble. A lot of them are water soluble. So it's present in coatings, insulation, and treated textiles. If nothing else, the insulation alone, we know that that's going to be there. We know it's going to get discarded into this place that's 5 feet above our water table. So they do not break down or get absorbed by the clay. And they're linked to reduced fertility, increased blood pressure in pregnant women, lower birth rates. And on that one, think about our national situation. Think about how we've been told over and over again that we're having declining fertility rates, declining birth rates. And think about the fact that these are probably in every water source that we have, because these guidelines are largely patterned after the federal guidelines, and it's rare that the states go any further. They'll usually just adopt whatever's there, as it was with ADEM. And so we can see this as a very real possibility for that national crisis. But we'll move on. Immunosuppression, hormonal issues, high cholesterol, liver disease, thyroid issues, and asthma all have been linked to these forever plastics. So I'm going to get into a group of chemicals now. That would be the volatile organic compounds. So what that translates to, it's a carbon-based chemical that easily evaporates at room temperature, releasing gases from liquids or solids. And if you've ever done any kind of remodeling work around your house or just been around a construction site, those heavy smells, all the cans that tell you only use in a well-ventilated area. That's the kind of thing we're talking about here. It includes benzene, toluene, and chlorinated solvents, which all sound like things that I really want in my water supply. These will move through a 3-foot liner in as little as 5 years. An important thing to note right there is the 3-foot liner, because this apex landfill only plans to have a 2-foot liner. So in as little as 5 years, these volatile organic compounds will likely move through a 3-foot liner. So how much reduced is that time by taking a third of that barrier out? And of course, at that point, you're drinking solvents. You're drinking all of these things that come with it. So your liner is just not going to catch it. And after it saturates that, penetrates that barrier, at that point, it's going to be a continuous feeding of those chemicals into the water supply. For 30 years, how many generations of your family will be drinking that contaminated water from the decisions that will be made here very soon? The last one that I want to touch on is heavy metals. Now, of course, heavy metals include lead, mercury, arsenic, chromium, nickel, and cadmium, to name a few. So these are common in things like batteries, which the modern construction site uses tons of batteries, cordless tools, various other things that they need to be portable so that when they move it around, they don't have to drag cords all over the place. So the thing about these is that they can form stable compounds with organic matter that allows them to leach through the liner, especially if the landfill is acidic. So there is nothing to keep lead, chromium, cadmium, arsenic from getting through that clay liner. It's going to happen. It's not a question of if. The liners are not effective. So seeing the list of things that will be present, that will be at best difficult for a liner to handle, and at worst a complete failure, it's clear to me that there is no safe way to locate a landfill, seemingly of any type, in a place that has such a water resource as we do. It's expansive. Again, look at the Cleveland Citizens Group video. They go into a little bit more depth about our aquifers and how interconnected they are and how far pollution can go from this site. So seeing the detriment, I'm going to go into a little bit of a risk-benefit comparison here. Now, of course, this is just a very few bullet points, but to me it's pretty clear-cut, so that makes sense. First, I want to get into the benefits. Of course, there will be a benefit of convenience for the contractors building in Blount County. However, that will also translate into a benefit for the contractors of other counties who will come here if it's slightly cheaper. And that leads into the tax dollars. I think with that, we have to ask ourselves, is every tax dollar beneficial, and how much detriment are we willing to say those tax dollars will buy? How much money do they have to make before it's okay for all of the health issues that will likely follow? That being said, let's get into the risks. Also a short list, but I feel like it has impact. I've been over a very small amount of what I have researched, but really what it all comes down to is the family health and longevity of our citizens. Again, it's not just you. It's your kids, their kids, their kids. How many generations are we selling their welfare just so we can have a few extra tax dollars scraped up? And speaking of welfare, we also have to mention the welfare of our environment. I mean, we live here. The things that we do today can have a far-reaching impact. Even if you don't have kids, even if you have no family members, you live here. It's your drinking water, most specifically, that we're talking about. How long can you go without water? Can you afford to drink only bottled water? Even if you can, how much of that is really that filtered? So, in essence, what we're saying is that for a very small amount of tax revenue, we're looking at selling the welfare of this community for decades to come, if not longer. That's the point I want to make here today. We do not benefit from a few tax dollars if we've sold our health for the foreseeable future. So, I'm Mike Parrish, and this has been the inaugural session of the Bully Pulpit. Like and subscribe.